Jack stopped to help a stranger on the road. He had no idea that this simple act of kindness would change his life forever. The next morning, a black limousine pulled up outside his house, and that was just the beginning. Jack Harper had grease-stained hands, a sore back, and a shop full of half-fixed cars waiting for him. It was late, the sun was bleeding out over the horizon, and all he wanted was a cold beer and maybe an hour in front of the TV before passing out. But, of course, life had other plans. On the side of the road, just across from his shop, sat an old sedan with its hazard lights blinking like a desperate signal for help, and next to it, a guy in a crisp, too expensive suit, standing stiff as a board, looking at the car like it had personally offended him. Jack sighed. Rich guy, fancy clothes, no clue how to fix a flat, let alone a dead engine. He'd seen it before, men with manicured nails and Bluetooth earpieces, who wouldn't dare lift a wrench, even if their life depended on it. Still, Jack wasn't the kind of guy to ignore someone stranded, even if that someone looked like he'd never had to work for a thing in his life. "Trouble?" Jack called out as he walked over, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better days. The man turned, eyeing Jack like he was some gas station attendant, instead of a guy who could rebuild an engine blindfolded. "Damn thing just died on me," the man said, voice sharp with irritation. "There's gas in the tank, but it won't start." Jack nodded, already guessing the problem. Probably something simple, starter issue, maybe a clogged fuel line, something a person who knew anything about cars could have figured out in 5 minutes. "Pop the hood," Jack said, rolling up his sleeves. The man hesitated, then did as he was told. Jack got to work, tools moving fast, mind even faster. 20 minutes, that's all it took. A few adjustments, a couple of test turns, and boom. The engine roared back to life. Jack stepped back, wiping the sweat off his forehead. The suited man let out a long breath, as if he'd just gone through some kind of great hardship. "Nice work," the man said, straightening his cuffs like he had just supervised the whole thing. "How much?" Jack looked at him. Normally, a roadside job like this, he'd charge a fair rate, but something in him, maybe exhaustion, maybe some leftover goodwill, made him shake his head. "Forget it," Jack said, waving him off. "Just happy to help." The man gave a curt nod. No smile, no handshake, no sign that he even registered what had just happened. Just a bare minimum acknowledgement, like Jack had just handed him a napkin instead of fixing his entire problem. Then, without another word, he climbed into the car and drove off. Jack stood there, watching the taillights disappear into the dark. It wasn't about the money, it never was, but a simple thank you wouldn't have killed the guy. Instead, all Jack got was the lingering smell of exhaust and the realization that some people went through life expecting the world to bend over backward for them. He let out a slow breath, shaking his head. Figures. Then, muttering under his breath, he turned and headed back to his shop, feeling like he'd just wasted 20 perfectly good minutes on someone who wouldn't even remember his name. What happened next would change everything. And Jack? He had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole was about to go. Jack wasn't a morning person, but the deep rumble of an engine outside his house made sure he was wide awake. He rubbed his eyes, squinting through the blinds. A limo, polished, black, out of place in his blue-collar neighborhood. 2 men in suits stepped out, moving like they had done this 100 times before. Then came the knock, sharp, authoritative. Jack sighed, rolling his shoulders before swinging open the door. "Mr. Harper," one of them said, his face unreadable, "our employer requests your presence." Jack frowned. "Employer? Who's your boss?" "You'll find out soon enough." Jack didn't like vague answers, but his gut told him refusing wasn't an option. With a heavy sigh, he grabbed his jacket and slid into the limo's uncomfortably luxurious seat. A different world. They drove past streets Jack knew, then past ones he didn't. The houses got bigger, the roads got smoother, the air even smelled richer. Then he saw it, a mansion on a hill, tall gates, security cameras, and a driveway full of cars, worth more than his entire life's work. Jack exhaled. What the hell was this? Inside, the floors were marble, the ceilings massive, and in the middle of it all stood him, the guy from last night. "Sit," the man said, sipping a drink that probably cost more than Jack's rent. Jack stayed standing. Maybe explain first? The man smirked. Yesterday you fixed my car. Jack crossed his arms. Yeah, that's kind of what I do. It was a test, the man continued. Jack's brow furrowed. A test for what? My patience? A test of character, the man corrected. And you passed. Jack narrowed his eyes. This was getting weird. I need someone I can trust, the man continued. Someone who does the right thing, even when no one's watching. Jack exhaled, crossing his arms. And the man stepped closer. I'm offering you a job. Jack just stared. What had he just stepped into? Jack Harper wasn't easily impressed. He had met plenty of guys who thought money made them important, the kind who wore expensive suits but couldn't change a tire if their life depended on it. But this was something else. The man in front of him wasn't just rich. He was the kind of rich that made the rules. Richard Coleman, the man said, extending a hand. I own several companies, a few investment firms, and he shrugged slightly, most of this state's infrastructure. Jack didn't move, didn't shake his hand. He just narrowed his eyes. A billionaire, great. Why me? Jack finally asked. Coleman studied him, taking a slow sip of whatever ridiculously expensive drink was in his glass. Because you helped me without asking for anything in return. Jack scoffed. That's it? You're hiring me because I didn't charge you? Coleman smirked. I've met thousands of people, Mr. Harper, and most of them only do something if there's a paycheck attached. You didn't even hesitate. That means something. Jack crossed his arms. And what exactly are you offering? Coleman leaned back. I need a chief mechanic for my personal fleet. Jack raised a brow. Personal fleet? That meant sports cars, classics, machines most people only saw in magazines. The pay? Coleman continued. More than you've ever made, and full access to my collection. Jack exhaled. It was tempting. Really tempting. But still, you want me to drop everything? Jack asked, shaking his head. Leave my shop behind? Coleman's expression didn't change. And what exactly do you have to lose? Silence. Jack clenched his jaw. He didn't have an answer. His shop? It was hanging by a thread. Every month, the bills got higher and the customers got fewer. One bad month, one unexpected repair, and the place would be gone. Coleman could see the hesitation. He knew he had Jack cornered. Think about it, Coleman said, standing up. But don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't wait forever. Jack swallowed hard. He wasn't just being offered a job. He was being offered a way out. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't know what to do. Jack Harper wasn't the kind of guy to grab an opportunity just because it had a big paycheck attached. He had spent years working with his hands, knowing the value of every dollar. If he was going to step into something bigger, it had to be for the right reason. So instead of shaking hands and calling it a deal, Jack leaned forward and said, I'll do it, but I have one condition. Coleman raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Go on. Jack met his gaze. I want to buy back my shop, fix it up, turn it into a place where people can actually afford to get their cars fixed. No scams, no insane prices. For a second, Coleman just studied him. Then a slow smirk spread across his face. I like that, he said. Consider it done. A new beginning. Jack's life changed almost overnight. He went from barely making ends meet to overseeing one of the finest private car collections in the country. Coleman's fleet was the stuff of dreams, classic muscle cars, cutting-edge hypercars, machines that most people never even saw in real life. And Jack? He was in charge of them all. But that wasn't the best part. His shop was his again. And this time, it was better than ever. New tools, top-tier equipment, a crew of skilled mechanics who actually cared about the work, not just the paycheck. No overpriced repairs, no upselling things people didn't need, just honest work, fair prices, and a place where anyone could walk in and get help. Jack hadn't just changed his own future. He was changing lives. Full circle one evening, Jack was about to lock up when he heard an engine struggling in the distance. A beat-up sedan rolled into the lot, sputtering like it was running on borrowed time. The driver stepped out hesitantly, eyes darting around. Jack had seen that look before. A man who needed help, but probably couldn't afford it. Jack nodded toward the car. What's the problem? The guy sighed. Honestly, no idea. Just died on me, but I don't have much to pay. Jack waved a hand. We'll figure it out. As he popped the hood and got to work, a thought hit him. That night on the roadside, that one small act of kindness. It had changed everything.